Thank you. We appreciate you coming out on a Wednesday night. Thank goodness there's not a debate tonight, or this room would be empty. And I'd be standing here. Actually, there'd just be an empty table. I'd be home watching. I like an empty chair. Yeah, that's why an empty chair. When Paralee and I started doing this 5-6 years ago, we really wanted to accommodate the people that worked or on the east side that couldn't make it to our normal meetings that we have either at lunchtime or during the day. We try and educate the people out on the east side of town, and so we were battling back and forth about what we should do for this meeting. And that morning I had heard Bill Risner on Wake Up Tucson, which is on 10:30 a.m. from 6 to 8. And if you have not heard it and you're up early, you need to, because they're very informative. So I said, you know, let's have Bill Risner. Of course, she said, he's a Democrat. I said, that's all right. This is not a Democrat or a Republican issue. It is a fairness issue. And so we settled on that. We also have Betty White, who is our statistician for the Republican Party. Is that how you would describe yourself, Betty?
My son calls me a data scientist.
Okay, a data scientist. All right. So Benny is our numbers guy. There are going to be some disagreements and some opposing points, but if you don't know what you're looking for, you don't know what you're looking for. And so, so for us to have election integrity, we don't have so much voter fraud here, thank goodness. But for us to have election integrity, we need to know what's going on. And so that is the point of this meeting tonight, is that we can educate, that we can be educated by. So we welcome you, Bill. Thank you very much for coming. You've come into the liar's den, but we're friendly, and we want to know what you know. And just like Betty, we want to know what he knows. So make yourself.
Thanks. I'm a lawyer. For money, I do mostly personal injury law. I'm a specialist in that area. But I like being involved in community issues, and I've been involved in the political arena for a long time. I think 1970 I handled a redistricting case for the Democratic Party in Tucson, and I've done stuff over the years. I've been hired a couple of times by the Pima County Board of Supervisors to give them advice as what they would call an election law specialist. So I've had probably more experience there than I would like. Mickey Donohue, who's going to be talking, has a very good background that you'll be interested in. He's retired from the National Security Agency, where he was one of the master programmers, so he understands computers. He's a member of the county election commission who's appointed by Ray Carroll, and in Maryland, where he was from, while he's working for the NSA, he was also involved in elections as election judge for the Republican Party back there. So I'm going to talk about computers and sort of how they fit in with the law, but if you actually have computer questions, stick around and then Mickey can answer those things, and if I make errors, he can correct what I say. I want to start with a little story. Since I'm talking Republicans, I'll tell you a Republican story. And this was 2004 election, District 20 in Phoenix, which was, I think, is on Ahwatukee and maybe some over to Tempe. I'm not even sure where it was. But it was an interesting election. They were electing, of course, two members of the House of Representatives. One person gets elected going away. But the second one, a guy named Anton Orlick, was 4 votes ahead of a guy named McComish. Well, Arizona law is kind of interesting. In Arizona, you can't get a recount if you want one. You know, there's some states where you can. Some states you can say, I want a recount and I'll pay the cost let's do it. In Arizona, you can only get a recount if it's 0.1% difference. It's an automatic recount. So we only have automatic recounts. This one was within that. So, but only like 20,000 total ballots that they needed to recount. So the Karen Osborne, who was the election director in Maricopa County, said, look, let's just hand count these, and because this is close, and we want to get it exact. Jan Brewer was Secretary of State. She sent a memo over saying, no, stop. You cannot hand count. That's against the law in Arizona. You can't look at those paper ballots. What you have to do is run them through the machine again and have the computers count them again. They ran them through, and they said, here's the result. McComish wins by 13 votes, and Anton Orlick loses. But what caught everyone's attention was when those same ballots were counted by the same optical scan machines again, it registered 486 votes that weren't there the first time. So they go to court, and they're using, it was ES&S software and equipment. They go to court, and the court's a very interesting proceeding. Anton Orlick, his lawyer, gives a subpoena to the ES&S person. So what happens is, first, on all there's something like 4 companies in the U.S. that run all the elections with computers. Their software is proprietary. It's secret stuff, and so for the counties to run it, they'll have a contract. Maricopa County had a contract with ES&S to have a person there to help them with the elections. So they wanted that person to come into court and testify, and so a subpoena was delivered. But the Maricopa County deputy attorney says, oh, we don't want this, any testimony about how these machines work. So she calls up the ES&S general counsel and says, hey, can you guys file a motion in court? And we don't want her to show up. So finally they agreed that she would stay at her home and hide out and wouldn't show up. And during the trial, the court says, hey, brings the lawyer up. We want this person here. Do you know how I can reach this person? No, I don't have any idea. Well, if the governor's life was on the line, do you know how I could reach it? This is important. No, we have no idea. The person that cooked it up died. No, can't get there. So they put all his testimony. Karen Osborne testified. She says, yes, on this one machine, the error rate was 18.3%, but that's within the expected range of these machines. I can get you the transcript under oath. And the total error rate was something like 3.5%. But hey, that's the way it goes. So at the end of the trial, then the judge is kind of disturbed. He says, I don't like this. And he tells Orlick, he says, this is a problem. Because in Arizona, since we can't look at the paper ballots, and I have to believe what this machine says, and I have to believe it because they had a little test beforehand. Before the election, they ran some ballots through, and that machine counted them right. So it's a certified machine, and I have to accept it, and I have no choice. And it's too bad that there's nothing I can do for you, and it's too bad that you don't have any remedy in this courthouse. But boom, McComish is in, and you're out. The problem we have nationwide, and this is for people who care about democracy and whether your vote actually counts, is that we're using computers. And they're computers that are privatized by companies that have developed the software. And computers do what they're told to do and what they're instructed to do by that software. And what you may think is, gee, I guess somebody is overlooking this system, So let's start at the top. What happens is, and let's say with Debo, for instance, that's what we use here, but it doesn't much matter because they're all banned. I was talking about ES&S in Phoenix. They now use Sequoia in Phoenix with the same ES&S machines. They're all insecure. So Debo takes its software and it needs to be tested. And so they hire the tester. They go to cyber corporations, say, let's make it, here's the contract. You test our software, and part of the contract is if you find some stuff, it's secret, you gotta tell us, and then maybe we'll do something about it, don't tell anyone else. And here's what you test for, but don't test for security. So cyber does not test for security. Also, they say, hey, we've got part of our software, but it's what we call COTS. It's off the shelf. We've not changed that any, so you don't need to check that. So cyber certifies this stuff. Incidentally, later, the federal government says, hey, we are election commissioners, we want to look at your test paperwork. Cyber doesn't have the paperwork to show that they did the right test. And they get after them because of the stuff that's changed that the company said was COTS. And cyber says, hey, look, it wasn't us. Debo lied to us, and they told us they didn't change that, and that's why we didn't check that. So the federal government then takes away the ability of cyber and Wiley, another one that checks, to check the software. So the software isn't checked from the top down for security. So then we get to Arizona. Arizona, our Secretary of State, accepts software if it's certified. So these guys said it's certified, they accept it. I took the deposition in a lawsuit of the Office of the Secretary of State. This is a thing, we lawyers call these 30B6 depositions, where you ask like a governmental entity or a corporation, here's what we're interested in, bring us your top person to answer these questions. So the Office of the Secretary of State sends Joe Canfield, who was the state election director, to answer the questions. Have you guys ever checked the software? No, we take the word of the vendors. Do you have anyone in your staff that knows how to look at it? No, we've never looked. Have you checked any county's computer to see what goes on and what's going on with any county in Arizona ever? He says no, and we can't. He says we don't have jurisdiction. We can't go check. So we don't know what's in the software, we've never looked, and we're not permitted to do that. I said, well, you have rules, don't you, about, for instance, the machines, that how secure they need to be and who can have access to those. Have you looked at that? No, we can't, we're not allowed to. We make the rules, but we're not allowed to check on that. Well, in Arizona, we have the bottom line I'm getting to is nobody's checked. Let's go down though. The Attorney General, no jurisdiction. They've never looked, they won't look, they're out. The counties have election directors that have an organization. So I take the deposition of Brad Nelson, who's our election director, who's president of this organization. I say, hey, in your meetings, you guys talk about security. No, it's never come up. We never talk about that. Oh, okay. 12 Arizona counties out of 15 use Diebold software. 3 have somebody that knows a little something about it. 9 rely on all the programming of some company in Glendale, and these guys don't know anybody who works in that, whether they're on parole or what's going on back there. That stuff, they email it into the counties and there it comes. But there's a Diebold user group. So I asked, in this Diebold user group, you guys get on the phone and you talk, how does that work? Well, Diebold sets up these conversations, and do you ever talk about security? Well, no, actually, we never talk about security. So actually, no one has ever looked to see what goes on with any county's computer in Arizona. Now, the Democratic Party, there was a group of us that was concerned. The Democratic Party set up an election integrity group that started looking at computers. I don't know anything about it, but I was part of it as the lawyer. A PhD named Tom Ryan looked at it, spent a lot of time, checked with it, wrote a report that the party that approved. We have an election integrity committee. That's when Mickey Dunho saw what we were doing. He understands computers and joined that effort. And we wanted to look ultimately at the database for the county to see what they were up to. And my interest was heightened in that because I had been involved as a Democrat, because we have 3 people that use the brand Democrat and on the Board of Supervisors, and because I had worked with the election department, been hired by the Board of Supervisors, naive guy, I thought maybe we could get some cooperation out of Pima County. And what I learned is not only couldn't we, but our director, Brad Nelson's a liar, he's not trustworthy, and we find out that they have regularly been cheating as a practice in that office. So let me explain that. A problem that we had is, you know, we have a lot of early ballots. 80% of them this time they expect to be early ballots. So I remember years ago, Tom Vogel's election. Surprisingly enough, the Democrats got more early ballots, but a lot of those people voted for walkout. So, but the total results was that you put 80,000 ballots through, and you get a piece of paper and it says, here are the numbers. No auditing anywhere. No check to see, is the machine right? Nada. This is it. This is like, you know, down from the Pope or something. Those are the numbers. So Tom and I, and this is in 2004 after the primary election, had lunch with Brad Nelson. We said, look, on behalf of the Democratic Party, we want to talk to you about early ballots and about verifying the accuracy of those early ballots. Is there a way that you can do audits? Is there a way that you can, when you're feeding through a batch, print out a summary report of what the votes are, count those, print out another one, then after election go back, hand count a sample as an audit to see if it's doing right? He says, I don't think that the computer software, I don't think you can do that. We said, our second suggestion is, can you segregate the early ballots by precinct, and then we can get a number that can be audited. No, that's too expensive. So he said, but I don't understand technology, and I'll check with my guy, the technical guy. Calls back later and says, it can't be done. You can't get a subtotal. 2004, he tells me that, me and Tom. And in 2005, I write the city of Tucson clerk, public records request, you got an election coming up, tell me how you're going to confirm, I want your documents to show how you're going to confirm the accuracy of that early ballot count. So she calls me and says, what's up, Bill, what do you want? I said, I want to know, can you do this, subtotal, and can you do an audit? She said, yeah, let me check. She calls back, she said, yeah, we can do it. So I agreed, I'll let Tom talk to your guy, and they did it. Then later, through the efforts of John Brakey, Jim March, we get a copy of the audit log from our county computer. And what we learn is they have been printing off subtotals. And then later we get testimony from the people in the office that says, yes, every single election, as soon as they start counting early ballots, they print off who's winning on the tally. And in fact, we had a rubber stamp printed that says unofficial ballot returns on it. And we kept them on a table in the room. Brad Nelson comes in out, gets one, leaves the room with it, and they always know who's winning and losing starting a week or two before the election. We've tried to get them to start later to count it. We've tried to get all kinds of information. We have phenomenal information that it's highly likely, and we're pretty sure that the regional transportation election was fraudulent and rigged. But in Pima County, not a single judge so far will hear it. 4 years, they won't hear it. The county spent like $1 million to keep us from getting a copy of the database, a full court press. I've never seen anything like this. I would take a deposition, they have 4 people from Pima County there. We wanted to depose somebody just to, as a foundation witness, to get a photograph, just to say that he took this photograph on a certain day. And 3 lawyers were there, and they questioned for, I don't know, 2 or 3 hours the photographer. And then we go to trial, okay, after all this effort and all this months, what's the deal? Chuck Huckleberry testifies, he says, because the Democratic Party had unanimously voted at a county convention that they should give us the database and not make us sue. Huckleberry says, it's all me. I've never talked about this with the supervisors. They've never given us instructions. And he wasn't aware that the county attorney filed a pleading in court saying, we want to hold back on this case because we're afraid that every single person in the election department will take the fifth. I said, well, did that kind of shake you up? Did you guys look into that? No. He says, it's my decision. Well, what do you base it on? He said, well, I don't know. I base it on John Moffett. He's my guy, and John says we shouldn't turn this over. Testimony from John Moffett. Why shouldn't you turn, what's your reason for recommending that this not be turned over? He says, well, you know, if you had a copy of the database, I'd have to give one to the Republicans, the Green Party, the Libertarians, and because you would have a copy, you would know the page layout of the reports and the font that was used, and you could print your own fake report, even though everybody else has the real ones. And even though we've got the ballots, your political party could print fake ones, and that would create dissension in the public, and we just can't have that, and that's our number one reason why you can't have it. So when we were trying to improve this system, and we run into the kind of fight and struggle that we received, then we said they're hiding something, and we want to know what it is, and that's why we've been wanting to get at those ballots, and we can't. But the central message isn't what they've done there. The central message is it is remarkably easy to cheat. The state of California, I have 3 reports here from the University of Connecticut that talk about all of the simple ways it is to cheat with this computer system. And you can't permit a computer system without checks, audits, and it doesn't matter if you've got a liar, because somebody's a liar. You just simply have to check. You can't have a system where you trust on those folks.
A lot of that is information that has been going on now since 2005. Bill brought Mickey Donahoe. Mickey's going to give us his credentials, if you will. Sure. And Mickey's going to give us like a 5-minute brief, and then we're going to hear from Betty White, and then we're going to take some Q&A. Okay? Thank you.
I was a Republican before I was a Democrat, and now I'm an independent. I serve on the Pima County Election Integrity Commission, as does Benny. I'm the appointee of Ray Carroll, and I've been on this commission since it was formed in 2007 or 8, I guess. It's 4 or 5 years. As Bill said, I was a computer programmer for the National Security Agency, and did a lot of research in computer security. And in 2004, I got involved in canvassing voters, and I wasn't satisfied that the election came out the way I thought it was going to come out in my precinct, and I thought maybe there was something wrong. So I got involved with the election integrity people and started looking more closely at Pima County's election system. In 2006, we sat down with Brad Nelson and with John Moffett and talked about ways to beef up security and to make the election process more transparent. And we made, I don't know, 50 or 60 changes to the way Pima County processed votes in the primary and general election in 2006, and we've continued with the Election Integrity Commission trying to improve things. My personal opinion is that we are making some progress. As Bill says, we still have this problem, and what I want to talk to you about and what these handouts that I gave you have to do with is hand count auditing. Arizona passed a hand count audit law in 2006. It required that 2% of randomly selected precincts would be hand counted as a check of the machine count. And it required that 1% of the early ballots would be hand counted as a check. In Pima County and in Arizona generally, the early ballots are not sorted by precinct. And so what happens is, as they're scanning the early ballots, they select batches of ballots for potential hand count. And so 4% of the ballots are set aside for potential hand count, and then random selection of batches from that 4% is made to the tune of 1%, which are actually counted. Unfortunately, you're not comparing that with the official results of the election. The official results of the election are reported by precinct, and these batches are simply, they print out a report, a county-wide report, before and after scanning that batch, and they set that report aside in a sealed envelope, and then when the hand count comes, then they check the hand count against those reports. But you're only setting aside 4% of the ballots, which means that if somebody was engaged in fraud, they could commit fraud on 96% of the ballots, of the early ballots, and you would never have a prayer of catching them. Now, I'm not suggesting to you tonight that anybody in Pima County is in fact engaged in fraud. Maybe up in Maricopa County, but not here probably. So at any rate, the handouts I gave you, the first slide talks about how we count votes in Pima County, I think in the interest of time, I'm going to skip on to my second slide, which is the hand count audit statistics. In 2008, Mr. Huckleberry decided that Pima County would hand count 4% of the precinct ballots, randomly selected precincts, instead of 2%. The law requires a minimum of 2%. And we still only counted 1% of the early ballots. But if you look at this chart, over on the column that says percent early, this is the percentage of ballots in Pima County that were voted early. And if you work up from the bottom, in 2006, 54% of the general election ballots were early ballots. In the recent primary, 81% of the ballots were early ballots. So we're reaching a point where virtually all of our ballots are early ballots. And we're only hand counting 1% of those early ballots. And we're only hand counting those against reports that were done before and after scanning a batch. We're not counting them, we're not comparing them with the official precinct results from the election. And as you can see in the rightmost column, we started out effectively the combination of precinct and early ballots. We were counting by hand 1.46% of the ballots, and in the most recent primary, we counted by hand 1.57% of the ballots. Not very many. In Connecticut, Bill mentioned Connecticut. In Connecticut, they hand count 10% of the ballots. In California, they're experimenting with a process where they would have a statistician tell them how many ballots to count in each race. Closer races, they would count more ballots, and races that are not close, they would count fewer. On the other side of your page, there are 2 slides that have statistics from the 2010 general election. I looked at this election because I was very concerned that Giffords seemed to have an overabundance of votes in the early ballots. And as I said, the early ballots are the place where if you were going to commit fraud, that's the place you would commit it. That's the place where if you wanted to stuff the ballot box, you could do it without getting caught. In the official results, there was a 13 percentage point difference between how Giffords did in the early ballots and how she did in the precinct ballots, which to my mind is a pretty large difference. I expect the percentage difference to be 2 or 3, maybe 4 or 5%. I don't expect it to hit 13%. And so I was very concerned that maybe there was some hanky-panky. We did a hand count audit of that race, and I looked at the hand count audit results, and they're presented there for you, and found that generally speaking, the hand count audit matched up with the official results fairly well. And although I couldn't compare the early ballot count directly, her percentage in the early ballot audit was essentially the same as it was in the precinct, in the early ballot official results. So in that early column, you can see that she got 52% of the vote in both the official results and the audit, and she got 44% of the vote in both the official results and the audit. So that gives me some assurance that there probably was not any fraud in that particular count. I also compared with Cochise County, and I found an 18% difference in Kelly's favor in Cochise County. I don't know anything about Cochise County. I can't say anything about whether they do fraud in Cochise County. I don't have any idea about that. But it gave me some comfort that at least there was a worse difference in Cochise County than there was in Pima County. So that gave me some confidence that Pima County was doing something right. And then the last slide is for the recent primary between Ray Carroll and Mr. Collins. There was a 14% difference in Ray's results in the early ballots versus his results in the precinct ballots. That bothers me. And it bothers me not because I think Ray is engaged in some kind of fraud. It bothers me because I cannot confirm the integrity of that particular election. And I can't confirm the integrity of that election because we don't hand count Board of Supervisors races at all. The hand count audit law exempts them from the hand count audit. And I found out that when this law was being put together in 2006, Brad Nelson and Karen Osborne from Maricopa County were involved in the writing of the law. And they were instrumental in making sure that County Board of Supervisors races would not be included in the hand count audit law. Now, does this mean that we're rigging County Board of Supervisors races? I don't know. I would like to have these races hand counted so that we could confirm the audit, we could confirm the integrity of the election. So that's where we are today, and we're still working.
Benny White will give you the election integrity view, if you will, from his side, if you will. And then we'll have some questions. Then you got 15 minutes. I think that's, maybe we'll give you 18 if you need them, but here we go.
So I'm going to try to cut it short so the folks will have a chance to ask questions. I do election oversight for the Pima County Republican Party. And what does that mean? Well, we start out with voter registration. I watch voter registration all the time in Pima County and the rest of the counties around the state now, as it turns out. I look for, are the records being updated frequently? Are they being updated accurately? Are the ages of the voters appropriate? When I first started doing this, we had some people that were born around the Civil War era. Those are no longer in there. And I have been able to work with the recorder quite well and get those done. The voter registration records are updated periodically. They'll be updated about 5 times this year in Pima County. Pima County and Maricopa County are heavily populated counties. They have some money to work with. And purging these records is expensive because you have to we look at the national change of address system that the post office uses. We balance names and addresses against our known names and addresses. We send out mail to people. If it's not forwardable, and if the post office tries to deliver it, the person's not there anymore, it comes back to the recorder's office. Then the recorder will try to contact them by phone, send them letters, whatever they can to try to get a hold of them. If they can't get a hold of them, then they're moved to an inactive status. If they don't vote for 4 federal elections, then they're moved into a purge status out of on the voter registration rolls. It's my impression that Pima County does a very good job of keeping those voter registration records current. And with regard to citizenship of voters, prior to the 1996 adoption of Proposition 200 of proof of citizenship, there were some people who were not citizens who were registered to vote. We've done some calling of some of those folks following elections when their early ballots didn't get turned in, and ask them, why didn't you turn your ballots in? And a lot of people will voluntarily say, I'm not a citizen, I can't vote. And so it's not so prevalent in Pima County, but it is in some of the other smaller counties that don't purge their records post-referendum. So that's one thing that we do to make sure that we have election integrity. For every election, I spend about 20 days inside the sausage making of doing the elections. And the way the Arizona system works and the way the statutes are organized is that the political parties have an extremely important oversight, responsibility, and authority. We can be there, we can ask questions, we can get answers. If we choose not to show up, then who knows what goes on. But here in Pima County, in large part in response to the 2006 RTA lawsuit, there's a very active participation by both the Democrats and the Republicans. The Greens are there sometimes, Libertarians show up occasionally, but the Democrats and the Republicans are there all the time. We're inside, like tomorrow I go and I start testing the machines. The machines have all been tested by the county, both the scanners that go into the polling place and the touch-sensitive screens. They look at every ballot style, every ballot type. What we want to look at is every place that a vote can be marked on that ballot. We want to test it to make sure that it's read properly and that it's reported properly. So the county does all their machines. Then the political parties select about 10% of the precincts at random. We don't tell each other why we're selecting them, but we do tell each other that this is the list of precincts that I'm going to test. And we do that so that we're each selecting a different list so we can get a wide spread. We'll look at about 30% of the machines in any given election. In this one, we're going to test about 78 different polling place machines. And we look, as I say, at all the different races. We want to make sure that, the candidates go through the trouble of running for election. We like to make sure that they get the votes counted. So we look at all of those things and all of the races all over the county. So I mark those ballots tomorrow, and then Saturday morning, all the parties will get together and we'll run the first logic and accuracy test. And we know what the results should be. We run the ballots through the machines, we do the touch sensitive computer screens. We run all those through the central count, we check the results, and the numbers have to match our numbers, or we have to find out what went wrong. They always match the numbers. Typically, the problem is I forgot to mark a ballot properly, but I go back and find that, fix it, and then it works as it should. Then, following that political party test, the Secretary of State comes in, and they do a test. They run some ballots through. They check their results. Political parties are there watching all of that, and we certify that that was done properly and the results were accurate. And then within 7 days, we have to start counting the early ballots. We're going to start this year on probably the 29th. The original scheduled posting was the 25th. That's probably a little bit earlier than we need to because the ballots are not coming in very rapidly. So we're going to hold off for about the 29th. We're expecting to see something on the order of about 325,000 early ballots come back in. So we'll start on the 29th. We work 8 hours a day. We look at probably about 30,000 ballots a day. If we have to, we'll work on the weekends, but the dollars are short, so we try not to do that unless we have to. We try to get everything early ballot-wise counted prior to the end of the election on the election day at 7 o'clock, so we can post those results for you at 8 o'clock on election night and get a good sense of how the election is going. As Bill alluded to, during that early ballot counting, we do periodically go through and pull batches of our ballots, and we run a summary report, and we run before we count, we run a summary report after, and that's what's hand counted after the election. We'll pull probably something on the order of about 3,500 ballots in this election cycle. Then we go through election day. My day starts about 5:30 in the morning. We have some machinery that's old. It does fail mechanically, electrically. From time to time, we have about 50 troubleshooters that are out there with spare machines and know how to fix machines. They'll try to get them running, but occasionally we'll have to reprogram a memory card, so that machine will come back in. They'll hook it up to the server. We'll reprogram the memory card, and they don't do that unless a political party is there to observe it. They don't ever operate that machinery without political parties being in the room to watch. After we've started counting the ballots. Before that, they build the election database. Okay, so we go through election day. The rest of the day after, and they're typically about 2 or 3 hours early in the morning, we get all those first startup problems figured out. Then I go around and look at polling places and see if the polling people are doing their jobs, how the voters are doing, how the lines are going, those kind of things. Brad Nelson, the election director, is doing the same thing. Democratic Party has people that do it. We have volunteers from the Republican Party that are all out there as observers to make sure that the laws are complied with. Then after the election, we'll get all the machines back in on election night. We check the seals on them to make sure that nobody's tampered with the machines. We don't ever upload any results from a machine if there's any evidence at all that something is amiss until we can go through the records for the machine, look at everything, and say, we trust that those results are good. If we can't do that, we get all the ballots, run them through a different machine, and then report those results. But that is very infrequent. Typically, we can figure it out. The things that will happen after Election Day is all those provisional ballots that are cast. We'll probably see something on the order of 15,000, 20,000 provisional ballots that will be cast. People show up at the wrong polls wanting to vote. They've changed their address, they didn't change their voter registration. All those things have to get sorted out by provisional ballot process. And that takes the rest of the week until, we'll have until the Tuesday following this week, this election, to get that sorted out. People can bring in their identification. They could show a better signature if they have to, those kind of things. We also get all of the early ballots that are dropped off. About 10% of the early ballots will be dropped off at the polling place on Election Day. So all those come in. All of those signatures have to be verified. The provisional ballots are first because you've got to contact the voter on a lot of those. And then on Thursday, they'll work the early ballots. They'll get in. There's kind of a rumor myth about, well, they don't really count the provisional ballots unless they need them. They don't really count the early ballots that are dropped off. We count everything. All of that hopefully will get sorted out either on the Friday after the election or the Tuesday following, and we'll be able to publish the final results, and the Board of Supervisors will certify the election. I think it's scheduled for the Thursday of the week following the election. We also do a lot of stuff that you don't see. The election department holds an audit where they look at all the paperwork that comes back in from all of the polling places, we account for all the ballots, make sure that the number sent out and used agrees with the paperwork that we have and the number of ballots that were cast. The recorder does the same thing for provisional ballots. She makes a report about how many did you get from which precinct, and how many were verified, how many weren't verified, what were the reasons that they weren't verified. All that goes into a big electronic report, and then I come along after that and look at those audits. So I do an audit of the audit, and I match up the canvas with all those audits, with the voter registration, with the early voting data that we get on a daily basis while early voting is coming in. And when I'm satisfied with that, I quit complaining about the election. But I want to make sure that it's right. The primary election, I was missing about 1,700 ballots that were reported in the early ballot canvas, or in the canvas as early ballots, and I didn't have records for them. And so as it turned out, they had failed to report some of those as they should have during the election. It was a programming error on the central recording computer of the recorder's office, not the election machine. But they generated another report, and I got down to 0 differential between the early ballots and the ones that were reported in the result. So those kind of things. And as far as the hand audits that are done and the percentage audits that are done, you know, the statisticians live in a world of magic and mirrors, and I don't understand anything about it. But a group of people decided that that's how many we needed to count. I agree we could probably count some more. I don't know what the more number is. I've heard as high as 30%. Well, we'd be counting for a long time. Maricopa County would have $500,000 they'd have to count after the election for a hand audit. That's quite a lot of ballots. So I don't know what that real number is. Probably something more than 1% or 2% or 4%. But we need to do a little bit more. I don't have any objections to running more races. It's right now the hand audit takes about 6 hours on a general election, where we're having to do the corporation commission and the president. And we do 5 races, and it takes people a long time. But if you've ever participated in one, that's one of your fellow citizens, and some of you have participated in it. Tempers get a little short, people get a little tired and cranky, and so I don't know how long you can keep them there. I used to fly airplanes, and we were designing a new airplane, and so we can fly this thing for 18 hours. I raised my hand from the back of the room. I said, anybody ever do a study on how long somebody can survive on one of those things? So anyway, there is a lot of oversight. We do check the accuracy. A lot of us pay attention a lot. I don't want you to leave here with the impression that there's rampant corruption, rampant fraud in Pima County elections. Maybe in Hoboken, Decatur, Georgia, Eugene, Oregon, maybe even up in Mojave County, Arizona, or someplace like that. I don't know, but in Pima County, it doesn't happen. I'm there to make sure it doesn't happen. And I check daily. So with that, I'm going to take this.
Bill, if you go on up too, so we can ask you both questions. Wendy?
Okay, the question I have is, when and or how do the armed forces overseas votes get counted? Are they counted wherever their residents or they're registered with, or is it done back in D.C., or how does that work?
It's done here. The military had a change in 1996 and then again in 2008 under the Uniform Overseas Voter Act, Military Voter Improvement Act. And the law now requires that the military voter ballots be sent out 45 days prior to the election to give them time. And also that the secretaries of state develop an electronic system for both sending the ballots and sending them back. Arizona has done a very good job, in my opinion, of doing that. We've been in compliance for several years, unlike a lot of the stories that you get off the internet and the national news. Now, the military voter registration is done wherever they are. They can come online and do it via the internet. There's a federal postcard that they can fill out and send in. There's supposed to be, under a new law, there's supposed to be a voter assistance office at every military installation. Well, every military installation includes a whole lot of small unit locations. And so a lot of the news that you hear about only 50% of the military installations have these voter assistants, well, most of those are attached to a battalion or brigade or some larger unit someplace, and those folks can get access to that. And they're all on email and smartphones and everything else now, so they can do it that way as well. The recorder sends those ballots out electronically. We sent about 1,500 in this election, and they go out 45 days prior, and we'll get about 100 or 150 of them back that day. They're sitting there ready to go. So they mark their ballot, scan it, email it back, or fax it back, and we get it. Now, we hold it when it comes back because we also mail them a paper ballot through the postal system.
Election, really is how the election works. We have something like 3,000 volunteers. All of those, really, all of them are going to be good people who are watching. All the systems that he's talking about exist, but the key thing is the simple way that they can cheat. So
And that's in the machine prior to it ever being turned on?
yes, before and after. Let me mention one thing. There's I've got 3 studies here from the University of Connecticut on our depot machines. One of the things that I just noted a minute ago is then he talked about this test where they see if the machine's working right. Okay, that's a good thing. But they talk about here in this Connecticut report that what they call a time bomb attack, that an attack utilizing, let me read this paragraph. During our own experimentation, we found that the bytecode language offers a wealth of functions. This is the Debo AccuBasic language that can be potentially exploited by an attacker. In particular, we'll demonstrate a time bomb attack in which the bytecode checks the time and date in order to decide whether the election has begun. An attack utilizing such code can contain proper behavior in pre-election testing in which the machine is verified by comparison with hand-counted ballots while behaving improperly during the actual election. So in other words, the machine can be programmed that during this test, count right, but during the election, count a different way. They talk in here about how...
we're talking about Connecticut or we're talking about Arizona?
I'm talking about 3 reports from the University of Connecticut analyzing the system we use in Pima County. The problem is that there are so many ways to cheat with our system. For example, the GEM software that we use has a feature where the data and the log that shows what's happened with the computer, that log is also part of the data. So for example, let's just talk about what we do know through testimony in court sworn. We have one computer operator in Pima County. His assistant of 4 years, Robbie Evans Jr., explained, and the number 2 person in the office explained, that our computer operator during the election would take home a CD, a backup data of all of the data on the computer. Then anyone at home with some computer knowledge could put that disk in the computer, could make changes in numbers, whatever change they want. Then, once they made the changes, delete on the log that those things have happened, come back, insert that in the machine, and you got the new numbers.
Benny, is that true?
I want to respond this way. If you're running a bank and you leave the vault open and the front door open and you turn out the lights, people can come in and steal the money.
Right.
Yeah, computers are vulnerable, but we do checks to make sure that that software is not modified during any time of the election. I don't want to get down into the weeds too far here because I'll confuse myself, but we do hash checks, we do registry checks of all of those databases that are used in the computer throughout the whole process. And the hash check goes through and makes sure that the software that's operating the machine has not been modified at any time. So there are checks. What people do, you know.
Let me show you how this works.
Can I ask my question, because it's along the same line? It looks like you have a good process in place, and that's good. I'm glad you have confidence in that system. The problem that I have is the fact that if the county feels that they have done nothing wrong, then why have they spent $1.5 million of taxpayer money to fight transparency? That's my problem.
That's something you have to ask the board of supervisors or the administrator about that. But
And hopefully when you get on there, Fernando, you can.
with regard to transparency, I'm there. I go inside, I watch, I ask, they answer all the time.
But why are they fighting it though? If they have nothing to hide, why don't we just turn over the papers? And I'm sure Mr. Risner will go away, right? I mean, if you know, I mean,
They've turned over the papers. They have the records. In the original lawsuit, Mr. Risner and the Democratic Party plaintiffs came forward and said, if you'll just give us this data, we will provide this tremendous public benefit by disclosing all of this fraud. They never did that. We had a public audit. We spent $400,000, I believe it was, by the Attorney General, hand counting all of these ballots that he's talking about. The hand count came back within 0.04% of the reported results from May of 2006. It's not 18%, it's 0.04%. And you can get that from interpretation of, is that a mark or is that not a mark? What did the voter want to do there? The machine doesn't do that. It just says it had enough mark. Yes, ma'am.
One thing that was alleged in the lawsuit or referred in the lawsuit was that those ballots are counted early and then that information is used to manipulate the remainder of the election. And you just admitted tonight that, yes, in fact, those counts are taken, so someone knows who's winning in the middle of an election. And they can begin robocalls and they can begin...
No, they don't.
How do they not know? You just said
We
that they
don't look
count
at
them. So you count them, but you don't look at your count?
We print that report, and we do not look at that report. It's sealed in a sealed container. It's put in a sealed bag. It is not open. Nobody looks at it. In 2006, they were printing reports and improperly looking at the cards cast on the top of the report so they could reconcile their daily counts. Now, the allegations made that they were telling the board of supervisors who was ahead and behind and all this stuff, maybe it happened. I don't know. I wasn't there. But there's a reasonable explanation for what they were doing. And in criminal allegations, you have to prove stuff beyond a reasonable doubt.
Well, then
I have a very reasonable doubt that they did that.
Well, let me, look, there's all kinds of stuff that takes me a long time to respond to. And let me mention a couple things. One, there's no question that they were printing these reports earlier. We have testimony from Robbie Evans Jr., who was the assistant, who says, yeah, they printed them regularly and they kept them on a table and they stamped it and people would come in. We have testimony from Isabella Rice, and this is under oath.
My main objection is this mail all happened in 2006. I'll just concede it.
Okay.
I've been there for 5 years. It has not happened.
Okay, let me move on then, if you concede that. The first lawsuit that we passed, here's what the problem was. We knew that they were cheating by printing those results earlier. So through efforts of Ted Downing and some key Republicans in Phoenix, we got a law passed where there's a camera on our computer recording. And they're they're not supposed to touch ballots or count them unless the political people are there. That's what they talked about. Mr. Donahoe is a very careful guy. He had a form that the Democratic observers used, and they would write down 1:45 p.m. this day, here's when one of these batches were done. After the election, we said, hey, we want to see the audit log to see when you printed these things. So wait a minute, you printed some where we weren't there. But luckily there's a camera. We want to know who did it, who was operating that machine when we weren't here and printed that. They said, Jim, we're busy right now, it's an election going on, we'll get to it. Then after a while, okay, we're not so busy now, let's go look. I said, darn, the computer only records 20 days, and that was 21 days ago, so we can't find out. So that's when we sued. We said, darn this, where are those reports? They're public records, where are they? They said, you know what? We put them in the ballot boxes, and we're not allowed to open the boxes. So I filed a lawsuit, it's a public record lawsuit, got a court order saying, open the boxes. Bring us the boxes. You say they're in there, bring them out. Sure enough, in the boxes were all of the reports printed when we were there, but not the ones printed when it wasn't on our sheet, and that was the case. So what we learned is not only have these guys been doing it, but they cheat when there's a camera on.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, there's...
So but they're not doing that.
We're talking about a few years ago.
Let's talk today. Let's talk.
Let's lay down time, but so I guess my upshot is, what do you two feel that can make us more secure and that can rectify the problems that you're seeing?
Well, I can answer that, but let me just talk to you about how simple this is to cheat. They can just put in, you know how these little jump drives?
Yeah.
You can just put a jump drive, download it, guy goes home, comes back, puts it in, and it's trivial, change the early ballot numbers. At home, little homework, you can hit whatever numbers, words, and off to somewhere else, they can make that change. The answer is simple. There are several answers. You certainly can do more audits, more percentage audits. And the fact that they have no audits on bond elections, county elections, or any county elections, and there's no law that says they can't. They made sure that the law doesn't make them, and they won't do it. They used to do it. Because I know. And they used to have, the political parties would pick an entire precinct, they would check all races. They refuse to do county races now. But the key answer is called graphic scanning. There's our two simple systems where you take the ballots when they come in at the county, and the ballots are counted officially. Then you use a high-speed scanner that takes a picture of all of the ballots.
But you wouldn't believe that would work the same on an official election as it would on a test run, would you?
No, this is the official.
That's what you're contesting all along here, is that the software is hokey, and it gives you a different result when it's run on a test run than it does on a general election. So what would you believe?
Well,
What would it take to get you to believe that the software?
well, if you have all the ballots scanned, you have a picture of all the ballots.
Yeah.
In
But still, the code could be different. The code could have tricks in it.
Forget the code, forget that.
That's what you're contesting, though.
But what I'm saying is if you graphically scan, if you have a picture of all the ballots, and the citizens in Humboldt County, California developed an open source system where they then took all the ballots after they were counted, they ran them and counted them with a different computer system, and it was fantastic. They discovered that there were 193 votes that the county had missed because there was a glitch in the system, and so nationwide they learned about the glitch. There's a private company called the Clear Ballot System that has a different system to analyze the graphically scanned one. So if you scan it, and then we can give you a copy of all the ballots. You got time? Sit home, count them yourself.
Is the voter ID number on the voter ID number?
No, there's no voter ID number that shouldn't be on anybody's.
Does anyone else have a question about this election?
Yeah. Is Brad Nelson a Republican or a Democrat or what?
I don't know what he is, he's elections there.
What is he?
He's Republican.
He's the-
Oh, no wonder. Okay.
You never know. And we
And
can
John
use it, so
Moffett,
isn't
what's
it
he? Is
amazing?
he a Republican?
I think he's a sociopath.
At the risk of making some of us feel like we didn't get our questions answered, we have to have the chairs picked up and we have to be out of the library by 8 o'clock. I mean, this is the way the library works. We have been known to stand out in front of the library until 8:30. So we're going to have one question, one more, and then we're going to pick things up and I'll move my signs outside. So there are 8 of the Romney Ryan signs for free if somebody wants to take 1 or 2 of them. But we're going to have one question from the lady in the booth.
Well, I was just going to ask, I mean, if you think this is such a great system, how much would it cost, and would the people in the county be willing to pay somehow to get that done?
Well, the county already owns some high-speed scanners. They really fairly is.
Well, just because it's a high-speed scanner, you have to make sure it's scanned correctly.
There have been offers of companies to even do it for free.
We understand this machinery is vulnerable and it's old, and programmed in $5 to $8 million in the county budget to replace this machinery. We haven't had any new machines to buy until recently. They've just certified, I think, 2 different sets, and so we'll probably have new machinery in the next year or 2.
Which would have more.
Yeah, they're incorporating this graphic scanning capability.
You want to say something? Okay. All right, one last comment from Bill Beard, and then we can go outside and keep talking.
I think this is something that I can get the 2 gentlemen in the front and Mr. Donahoe to agree on. One of the problems is there are holes in election law. Would you not agree?
Yes.
I agree that the laws need to be updated, and I work on that all the time.
Can I ask all 3 of you to encourage everyone in this room, regardless of your political affiliation, that regardless of what November brings about, we each contact our state legislator and the governor's office to make the changes necessary?